couple tips for if you want to pose your subject with movement. Tip number 1 is don't just have them move a lot, because then you can't tweak and make it better if you're just letting them move. If I find something I like, it's close, I'll have them repeat that movement over and over again, each time saying, okay, again, with your chin a little bit to the right, again, a little bit longer. And so, for example, I'm going to be the model right now. Okay? When you see in Harper's Bazaar or Vogue or whatever, all those shots where the model, you always see they're jumping and their back foot's just barely off the ground. You see it a billion times. They're not always just going, like they're not moving across. That doesn't happen. A lot of times what they are doing is literally this. Ready? It's just the same movement. And I'll say, longer neck. Okay, hand to your face. Like, and then you can just make tweaks, versus if you have someone jumping around, you can't. Everything's changing. And then, of course, your composition changes. So the same thing is true in all of my dress floofy shots. Okay, the ones where the dress is flying. This one made a huge difference for me. I don't just have the model throw the dress and look at the camera. You know what I mean? I don't have them twirl and look at the camera. Instead, what I do is I'm going to pretend this is my camera here, okay? I tell the model exactly what pose I want her to end in. So let's say, for example, I want this, whatever. Leaning out, soft hands. Okay, so to get the dress to floof, I could do, for example, pick up the dress and kick it out. And the reason I'm telling this is I'm telling her where to feel at the end of that pose. At the end, when I click, you're going to lock to that pose. And so it's back and forth. Pick up the dress, kick it, versus like, you know what I mean? It's repeated action, because then I can actually tweak it. But more important is the twirl. I'll say, okay, let's say that I want you here, whatever, hand up here, okay? Whatever. If I want this dress floofing, what I do is I'll wind up their body. So maybe it's here. I'm going like this. I'll wind up the body behind, and then I'll say, and snap to the pose. And snap to the pose. Because how are you going to get that if they're, like you'll never get the position. So I pose them exactly how I want it to feel, and then I add motion to it. And you'll see the motion in the hair. You'll see the motion in the dress. So a lot of times, it doesn't mean that the dress is floofing up in all different directions. It might just be like a little bit of the fabric or a little bit in the hair. But it makes a difference because it's what infuses that feeling of energy. Instead of being a pose, it's a moment in time that you're able to capture just because of those little movements. So in the very beginning of this class, well, at the very, very beginning, but I did some of my contact sheets. And if you can go back and look at that, one of them was on red on red. And if you noticed, there were two poses that were very, very similar. And one of them, I didn't like her hand, and the other hand looked a little bit. I was having her do this. Pick up the dress, and just changing it just a little bit each time. But it was fundamentally the same pose. And I'd say, great, elbow back a little bit. Again, softer hand, again. So that would be my tip, is for fashion. It's not just next pose, next pose, next pose, twirl. It's precise. So if you want to add movement, take more control, tell them what you want that pose to feel like at the end.